this is Bravo 1, Bravo Team Airsoft, and today I'm going to go over a brief view due to a couple of questions we've had about the Australian SAS kit. Now, this is something I've been building myself for quite a while now, and it was formally discussed by the rest of our group that the following event, which would be August next year, which is quite a long time away, that we do Australian SAS for this kit, which Bravo 1 and Bravo Team in general, we all like to change the kit up, so it's always different units. So trying different things each time. We've recently just done SOG, so this time we're going to look at doing Australian SAS. So this mannequin on the side, which I refer to as Bob, he is basically the mascot for different units. He was Viet Cong not too long ago. He's now Australian SAS, but I figured with all the kit on here we could go over the basis of what I've done for the Australian SAS kit and where I've got the ideas from and how you could copy something similar, as I've had several questions of what kit they use, what guns they use, etc. So I will start off with the rifles. It's all good things. In fact, I'll start off with something first that I've currently been building. So this is my A&K M60. Now it's been configured to an Australian SAS style M60, so it's had a lot of the weight cut off. Originally it was done as the chopped M60 for the Navy SEALs. That's originally why they got the idea. Kept looking at more pictures and thinking, how can I take more weight off it and make it look more unique? So it's pretty much had everything from the front sight, the front flash hider, the hand grip, the butt pack on the stock. It's had quite a bit of stuff ripped off to it, and then it's had the handles tied to the side, so it's a matter of using it like that. Hold it there, move. It's allowed it to be a lot more manoeuvrable and a lot easier to pack within the bag. So this is my Australian M60 based on the A&K M60, which was a full-size Vietnam one to begin with, but this is how we are now. So this is the M60 I've done for that bit so far. Depending on how reliable that is, it will be used, but it's not my go-to, it's just something I've added to the collection since I've had it flying around. Now the one I'm expecting to use the most, which is the most iconic for the Australian SAS, is the SLR. So if I just grab this off of him, show you a bit more in depth. So this is the standard Aries SLR with the wood furniture. As you can tell, it doesn't look standard to what it's supposed to when you buy it. Again, doing research online, I found that Australian SAS tend to chop and modify a lot of their own guns, or at least their armoury does it on their behalf. So I've copied the same sort of idea. So I've basically had the barrel cut down, give it more of a CQB sort of look, which a lot of them seem to do. This has an enormously long barrel on it, which I personally didn't like. Again, it's packing it in the bag and the manoeuvrability, I'm all on for that. I've extended the magazine to a 30 round 7.62 mag. Now originally there was a machine gun variant of this that was issued to the Australians, but they didn't really like it, so they ended up using the M60 instead, but it was still in the armoury. So apparently a lot of these machine guns had 40 round magazines, SLR magazines, and apparently the SAS would steal these magazines from the army and switch them out with the 20 round mags. Which is why some of them had SLRs with 40 round mags. Now I've made a 30 for this one out of the magazines. I could have made a 40, but the reason I haven't made a 30 is because there's quite a lot of wobble in this magazine, because these are quite heavy even compared to like compared to M16 magazines. These are still quite heavy, you know, in comparison. They're quite weighty for the mid caps that they are. So instead of going 30, I went 40 to give myself a bit more manoeuvrability, but still keep that cool wow factor. I have added the field dressing on the back, as that seems to be something that Australians in general commonly quite did, so I thought I'd give it another Australian SAS type of look. I heard rumours that some of them cut the grips off the top, the handles, but I want to keep that on there because I do quite like this. I think that's a good thing to have. And the last thing is the grip that I've made at the front, which is like the the Thompson kind of grip at the front. I noticed that some of them did that in some of the pictures, so again I copied the same sort of idea. This is a DMR, so it only fires on the semi-automatic, running on various BBs. I haven't quite decided what's probably best for it as of yet. Yeah, basically this is how I've done it. It's quite heavy still, a lot more manoeuvrable than it was before I got it. So I have one of these type of magazines, and the rest we're going to the standard 20 round magazine, which probably would have been accurate to what it was anyways. I think the originals, the machine gun variants only came with 140, and then after that it was down to using the 20 round magazines. So that's that. I've also added a little strap on the back, just pull it out a bit like a Vietnam style mag pull design, just to get it out. Thought it had a bit more character to it. So that's my Aries SLR. So the next ones are obviously going to get a bit more standardised after the SLR. Now obviously it's not a standard SLR as you'd see as the infantry goes. It has been mocked up so you can tell it's SAS, but I have done several others. So I've probably mentioned this in previous videos, but this is my M60 M203. It's originally inspired by the Australian SAS. That's where I got the paint job and the kind of idea that I've done it the way that I've done it. So I originally got this idea from a movie called The Odd Angry Shot, which was based on the SAS in late Vietnam. That's where I got the idea from. That's where I've copied it. So this is another one of my options for the Australian SAS kit. As I've probably gone over it previously in videos, so you know what's gone on it and what's been done. But as you can see, it's got the Australian sort of look with the bandolier pouch on the back for the first aid pouch. It's got a custom paint job, 40mm grenade launcher. It's got upgraded internals, a bit of tape wrapped around it, and this is an exceedingly really good gun. So this is another option for the Australian SAS. I'm not expecting everyone to have one of these, as it was custom built from 3 different gun parts built together, as you often can't buy one of these as they are. It's normally like an M16A4, that 2 or 3 that you've got to modify. So that's the M16. So the next one is pretty much getting even more standard, which is aiming towards your standard M16, which I'm not going to pull over because it's behind Bob himself, and it means I've got to move him out of the way. But yeah, basically if you have a standard M16 or M16A1, like so, something like this should just do for Australian SAS or even standard infantry, as these were favoured. Because at the time, especially early war, Australians didn't have enough kit for the kind of men they had, so they had a mixed kit between British era kit and American era kit. That's why often when you see the weapons, early war, they've got a combination of M56 weapons and British pouches on them. So SLR or M16, if you're already in the Vietnam field, then obviously your M16 is more than likely something you're already going to have. So you can use that for your Australian SAS loadout if that's what you're going to do with us. Again, done the same thing like I have with everything else, putting the field pouches on the back in case we get wounded and such. Added a bit of tape to this one. It's got a standard M16 sling, but this is basically just my standard build M16A1, and then I do have an early version M16 as well. So again, if you're after kind of weapon idea and you can't go with the ones that I've gone with, such as the chopped M60 and the SLR, etc., this is your basic way to go for a standard Australian SAS or Australian SAS loadout. So that's the M16s out of the way. Now pistols I'm not going to really go over, because as far as I can tell they weren't widely used by the Australians as they were by the Americans. If they did, it would have been either a Browning high power or a Colt 1811, which were commonplace for the war at the time. But again, I'm not really going to go into that so much because that's not really that important. So if you're not going with a pistol, you don't have one, I won't worry about it. I'm going to carry one because I always carry one somewhere once I've found out where to carry it amongst the kit. So obviously it being Australian SAS, just for the sake of going around base often for milsims, is the SAS Barrett. Obviously it wouldn't have been worn in field, but for the sake of the mannequin to show what it is, and for the milsim events in camp, it just stand out as Australian SAS. That's why I've got the Barrett. So that's that. So then we have the scrim netting, which usually goes around the neck, and sometimes they tie this across the head. So obviously on the back, like so. Or they'd have it rolled across the neck. I've seen that in quite a lot of people. This is a common Australian thing. Even the regular infantry seem to have done this a lot. So it's another iconic thing, because as far as uniform goes, it's ERDL kit, especially late war. They started using a lot more ERDL as Tiger was, phasing out with it being an early development kit. Just to stand out from, it's not SEALs or Rangers or Marines or whatever else that was floating around at this time using this kit. They got more common late war. The scrim net and the SLR, it stands out that it is Australian SAS and not some other American kind of unit. So yeah, we've got the ERDL trousers and shirt. These are getting quite old, this particular pair, because I've used it for several different loadouts, so it's got quite a lot of holes in it. Now the webbing, this was a tricky one to do. I went on Google and found out SAS webbings, and I could have done a standard Australian infantry webbing, which I am building currently for another loadout, standard Australian loadout, but as far as SAS, this is the one I came with. I believe this was B Company SAS that did this within Vietnam. So basically I've got an M56 pistol belt and an Australian M56 harness at the top, which is this bit. So they are two different ones. One's American, the top one's Australian, but it works out quite well, and considering what I've done to it, you can't really tell much anyway. After that I've got a 40mm grenade vest, which was especially seen common to late war, especially I think it was even used to Vietnam and probably early Afghanistan Iraq wars as well, for that matter, for the 40mm under the M4s. So I've got one of them and I've chopped it up and I've put 5 at either side, which seems to be what this SAS trooper in 2 squadrons seem to have built. So I've put that on either side, and it takes up to 10 40mm pouches ideally for the M60 and M203, which is just aforementioned. They go in there, so there should be 10 at either side. Depending on what I'm using for this, it could end up being the SLR or the M60 or even an M16. I could always end up putting the Enola Gay smoke grenades in here. They should fit, if I remember rightly, they do. So I might put 10 of them in here, depending, you know, what kind of thing I'm going out with at the time. We've got 2 compass pouches / field dressing pouches on the front. Aforementioned actually what they used them for, unknown, they didn't specify. But I've added them on there just to show that the dedication of the kit is accurate to what they've said they used. I lift Bob's hand up here. We have 2 of these 58 pattern SAS Special Forces type pouches. These were commonly used quite often in the Falklands by the British SAS. It seemed that they favoured them for the Australian SAS as well. Now these will hold 3 or 4 SLR pouches, and then probably equivalent of the same in M16 pouches. So that's what I've got on the front. So that's everything for the front side of the webbing. Obviously I mentioned the M56 belt, which is just a standard American one. It's just a cheap repro. Should build it enough. And I'll turn up round just so we can have a detailed look at what's behind him. So we've got the British 36 pattern pouches on the back, which is one's ideal for SLR magazines. You could probably put other stuff in them, such as grease gun magazines or whatever else it is you use. So I've got one of them, but it stands out as the Australian thing, as again Americans would not be using something like this for this kind of kit. Then we've got a British World War II, I believe it's a 1942 water bottle pouch, which grabs on the back of the hooks of the M56 belt, which is stops it from actually being on your top. So I don't know why they did this, but this was something the Australian SAS did. It also has the metal original water bottle and mess tins in them. Apparently this is something they use. This is what's in it. I did think maybe they used it as a dump pouch, but apparently they didn't. They actually used it for its intended use as a water bottle. So I've put one of them on there. Just to add it to a bit more character, I've added the M56 water bottle on there as well. This is a reproduction version that I've painted up and modified just to make it look a bit more realistic, as opposed it was a repro version and not a full end version. It is expensive when you build a lot of loadouts and you spend £45 per time on a water bottle pouch. Just mentioned for the bag, this is basically just your common alert rucksack. I've used this for SOG and a few other SF units. It doesn't have the metal frame on it. It's the Arvin inspired American designed one. So but that's the bag. Then pulling around a bit more, we've got another 36 pattern magazine pouch on this side. So we've got 2 on either pouch, so you can hold quite a bit of ammo. And then we have a mock SLR bayonet. Now this was originally a real SLR bayonet, and it does actually fit on my SLR. However, the blade itself has been snapped and broken at some point, and it's been replaced with a big sheath of wood in the same design that goes right to the end of the bayonet scabbard. Now, obviously, with knives and stuff like that, as far as airsoft, they don't like it, so it's more than likely going to stay in there. But if it was ever an issue, it is made out of wood, so it can't actually harm anybody. It's got a canvas loop wrapped around the side that I've personally sewn on, so it actually keeps the bayonet in place, so it can't be pulled out or folded out. It's not purely there for cosmetics, just to sell the loadout. And I believe that is everything. So I'll just go around again. This is the back. And as you can see, there's a couple of holes in the uniform because it's gotten quite old and worn over the time. And yeah, that's pretty much the Australian SAS kit. The only last thing I can mention is now the boots. So at the moment he's got some standard Australian infantry boots on, which is actually a part of my secondary loadout. I have just done that purely for looks on the actual figure itself, just to sell it a bit more. But as far as I can tell from boots, they use anything from the standard infantry boot to your Panama Sol US Army type jungle boot. You know, obviously we all know what these are, because if you're doing the events regularly, or even if you're just skirmishing and what have you and you've got the kit, this is something you should 90% of the chance own. Obviously you can get away with the black versions, or even the older versions that was out before the actual jungle boots, the standard black level ones, which you can't imagine being comfortable, which is the same ones as what they used for the Australians early war. And then apparently a lot of even regular troops preferred the jungle boots. But you've got two options for basically the Australian SAS. You can go with the standard black Australian boots, probably get away with the same with the early American boots. But I would recommend the jungle boots. One, they look cooler. Two, they're a lot more comfortable, and even the jungle boots, these are actually that comfortable, but in comparison to the standard black ones, I would recommend going with these. So that's as far as jungle boots. Hats, it's up to you where you go with hats. You could go with a standard bony, you could wrap a bit of a rag around it. I'll probably do the same thing with something like this. Got one of these around the heads, as I'm not one for wearing hats, but depending on what the weather's like, I do. So that's everything for hats. The helmets and body armour in general, they just didn't wear. Even the standard infantry didn't wear any kind of flak jacket or helmet, as the counterpart with the US did. So yeah, that's pretty much everything as far as the Australian SAS kit goes. Weapons, like they did have access to stuff like Car-15s, but from what I've read, they didn't like them. The Australians favoured range and accuracy over the compactability of Car-15 or any other such weapon. So the common weapons I can find that they used is the ones that I aforementioned. I suppose they did have access to stuff like Bren guns and Sterlings as well, but so whether you've got something like that and that's what you want to use as part of your kit, which is all fair dues. But yeah, this is basically what I've come up with my idea. So if you're after inspiration or ideas, or you're still waiting to ask me something, which I've had quite a lot of questions on, this is what I'd recommend for what I've done and what I reckon you should do as a cheaper option, as apart from like the webbing that should equaled out to be like just shy of £300 to build, or the SLR or the M60 and SLR, if you're in the M60. But for a basic infantry kit, I would go with the RDL standard M56 webbing, and then go with your typical jungle boots, and then maybe add like a 36 pattern pouch or something on the back, just to sell it more as an Australian look as opposed to American, so they don't see this and think it's obviously Lerps or Marines or something like that. So anyway, this is Bravo 1 with Bravo Team Airsoft on the Australian SAS kit. Thanks for watching.